With that, let's begin. And as the sponsor of the bill, Representative Rashid is recognized to lay out what the bill does and why he filed it.
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. Chair Vella, Vice Chair Shearer, Minority Spokesperson Sosnowski, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to present HB 2723 this morning. I want to begin by recognizing the advocates, community members, and colleagues who built momentum for this bill, and to thank the chairs of the Black, Latino, Asian, and Progressive caucuses, the Deputy Majority Leader, and the dozens of lawmakers across both chambers who have already signed on. This support reflects a broad understanding in the General Assembly that Illinois is on the wrong side of a problem we created and that we have an obligation to fix. You'll hear from 3 other witnesses today besides me, and I want to tell you upfront who they are so that you understand why I'm going to leave certain things to them. You'll hear from Marty Levine, who spent 50 years as a Jewish institutional leader in Chicago, including 4 decades helping build what is now the largest Jewish community center system in the United States. Marty will tell you from inside the institutions who conceived of the policy we're working to repeal, how it was conceived and whose interests it was actually built to serve. He will also share the words of Israeli leaders, former intelligence chiefs, former generals, leading Holocaust scholars, who have said in public, in their own newspapers, what their own government is doing. I'm going to leave that material to him. You'll hear from Richard Goldwasser, a Chicago attorney of 35 years who clerked for the president of the Israeli Supreme Court and chaired J Street's Chicago chapter for a decade. Richard will speak to the broader picture, how a law like ours, now copied by many other states, corrodes the democratic rights and values that define this country. I'm going to leave that argument to him. And you'll hear from Yasmin El-Agha, who will speak to the human reality of what this law shields from peaceful protest. I'm not going to try to do justice to that. I'll leave it to her, and I'll ask you to listen to her with the same care that you give to every other witness today. What I want to do in the time I have is 2 things. First, I want to tell you who this law is about, not in the abstract, but in concrete terms. And second, tell you what this law actually does. I was born in Chicago. When I was 5 years old, my parents put my siblings and me on a plane and we moved to our village in the West Bank called Tormosaya. It's about an hour's drive north of Jerusalem. My grandparents are from there. My great-grandparents are from there. My great-great-grandparents are from there. My entire lineage on both sides, for as far back as is recorded, is from there. I lived there until I was 11, and I've been going back every couple of years for my entire life. The village is built in a valley, stretching into a hillside of the West Bank. The houses are stone. From my family's roof, you can see mountains, the neighboring village, olive, fig, and almond trees, schools, and the hustle and bustle of village life. Some of those trees are more than 1,000 years old. My family has tended to some of them for hundreds of years. In October and November, when the olives are ready, almost everyone in the village stops what they're doing. Everyone goes out to the trees. You spread tarps under the branches, you comb the olives down with your hands, the kids run between the rows, and at the end of the olive harvest, you press the oil. You eat dinner outside, you give jars of oil to neighbors, to relatives, to the family members who flew in from Chicago or Amman or New Jersey. That is what a Palestinian community looks like when nobody is interfering with it. It is people on their land, learning to love the traditions that have been passed down from their parents and grandparents, raising their children to do the same. Palestinians are a people who love education the way some people love sports. My parents had nothing when they got here. They built a life so that their children would be educated. Every Palestinian family I know aspires to this. Education was the inheritance my parents fought to give me and my siblings. And it is the inheritance that people of my village and Palestinians across the West Bank, Gaza, and the diaspora have always given their children, even when the school is a flimsy tent. We are also a tight-knit community. If you're a Palestinian in Chicago, you almost certainly have cousins in both hemispheres. And if we can't keep in touch, our aunties keep us in the loop. The young man who was killed in our village 3 summers ago, Omar al-Quttain, had family in Oak Lawn, right here in Cook County. The father of 5 who was killed in the West Bank last year, Khamis Ayad, had family in Cicero. A Palestinian child whose skull was fractured last year by Israeli settlers is about to graduate high school in a few weeks in Bridgeview. That's not a coincidence. That is a community that has held itself together across borders, across oceans, across a century of pressure to break apart. I tell you all of this, the trees, the harvest, the education, the family ties, because everything I'm about to say to you about this law makes sense only if you understand that this is who the law is about. We are not an abstraction. We are not a line item in a foreign policy debate. We are a people. We are members of your communities. We send our kids to the same schools you send your kids to. Our children play soccer and basketball with yours. And many of us, like me, grew up partly here and partly there, with 1 foot in Cook County and 1 foot in a village that has been on the same hillside since before the United States existed. Now I have to tell you something harder. There is a project to make sure the village I just described to you does not exist in 50 years. It is a project to take the land. It is a project to take the trees. It is a project to break the connection between the Palestinians of Cook County and the Palestinians of the West Bank, to make sure my cousins' children do not inherit the orchards their great-grandfathers planted, to make sure that fewer of us each year can go back, to make sure that what remains of our community in our homeland is eventually, quietly gone. This project is not a secret. It's conducted in broad daylight by a foreign government that says publicly what it intends to do. Its current finance minister has stood at podiums and said that there is no Palestinian people. Its current security minister has been convicted in Israeli court of supporting terrorism and lives on land that was taken from a Palestinian village. The settlers who attacked my village in 2023, hundreds of them in broad daylight, were not arrested. They were protected by Israeli soldiers. That is not an accident. That is the policy. The law I am asking you to repeal today is one of the tools of that project. It's not the most violent tool, and it's not the most visible tool, but it is one of the tools, and it's the only tool that has Illinois' name on it. Here's what the law actually does. In 2015, this state created a body called the Illinois Investment Policy Board. The law gave that board power over investment decisions affecting more than $120 billion in public pension assets, the retirement security of nearly 895,000 Illinois public employees, retirees, and beneficiaries. Then the same law did something extraordinary. It exempted the board's decisions from the ordinary fiduciary duties that every other body managing public retirement money in this state is required to follow. The board has no duty to ask whether a divestment is good for retirees before forcing it. It has no published standards. It has no formal appeal. It has no audit. It has no annual report. A 7-member politically appointed board, exempt from the most basic legal protection owed to the workers whose money it controls, has the unilateral power to force the sale of pension assets if it decides, without standards and without explanation. If it determines that a company's business decision to boycott Israel is, quote, politically motivated. The statute does not define politically motivated. That phrase, the trigger for the entire enforcement machinery, is left to the discretion of the board. And what is the board's actual mission? Well, the chair of the board's Israel Boycott Restrictions Committee, in writing, in correspondence later released through public records requests, described the mission as, quote, preserving Israel's sovereignty, including over the West Bank. That is the documentary record. That is not what an anti-discrimination law does. That is what a foreign policy enforcement body does on behalf of a foreign government, paid for with the retirement savings of Illinois teachers and bus drivers and judges. Marty Levine will walk you through that record in more detail, but I want you to hear that phrase in writing from the man the board put in charge of its Israel boycott enforcement work, and I want you to hold that letter, that language, next to the institutional letter you've received that calls this an anti-discrimination law. The architect of the law itself is a man named Richard Goldberg. He drafted it as a staffer for Governor Rauner. He has spent the years since then at a hawkish foreign policy organization called the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, where he's currently a senior advisor. He has spent the last several years publicly advocating for war with Iran. He appeared on television in March of this year to comment on active U.S. and Israeli strikes on Iran, the same strikes that, according to Pew, 61% of Americans disapprove of, the same strikes that have driven gas prices in this state up to almost $5 a gallon, which is quickly making life even more unaffordable for Americans and Illinoisans. That is the architect of the Illinois statute. He still publicly boasts that Illinois was the first state to pass this kind of law and that many other states have copied it. He's continued to lobby the board he helped create, including in 2022 through a formal memorandum to the board demanding it move against Morningstar, an Illinois headquartered company, for the supposed crime of providing accurate environmental, social, and governance research, ESG research. So when I describe this as a partisan board carrying out a political project, I am not using a figure of speech. I'm describing the documentary record. The board has been used repeatedly to coerce American companies, San Francisco's Airbnb, Chicago's Morningstar, into changing their lawful business practices to align with the foreign policy preferences of a foreign government. It uses the retirement savings of nearly 900,000 Illinoisans to do so. And it does all of this without the basic fiduciary duty that protects every other dollar of public pension money in this state. This is not a policy. That is a censorship practice. You will be told that this law applies only to foreign companies. That is not true. The chief Senate sponsor of the original 2015 statute wrote to the board in 2018 that the so-called U.S. company protection, in his own words, was non-binding. And he urged the board to use the law against San Francisco-based Airbnb. And the board did. That is documented. The same year, the board moved against Chicago-based Morningstar. The board did not blacklist Morningstar in the end, but only after Morningstar agreed, under the threat of forced divestment, to eliminate its human rights index entirely. That is state coercion of an Illinois company, headquartered just a few blocks from where I sit right now, by a board operating under this statute. The "we don't go after American companies" claim was disavowed in writing by the man who passed this law. You will be told that this law fights discrimination. The man the board put in charge of its Israel boycott enforcement work said in writing that its mission was preserving Israeli sovereignty over Palestinian land. The statute itself protects from boycott not only Israel, but in the words of the law, territories controlled by the State of Israel. That phrase covers occupied Palestinian territory that the United States itself does not recognize as Israel, and that the International Court of Justice declared to be illegally occupied. That is not anti-discrimination policy. That is foreign policy, specifically the foreign policy of a foreign government, with Illinois pension dollars conscripted to enforce it. You will be told that repealing this law means Illinois is now boycotting Israel. That is also not true. HB 2723 does not engage the state of Illinois in any boycott of any country. It does not direct our pensions to divest from anybody. It simply restores the ordinary state of affairs that exists for every other country in the world, that companies are free to make their own commercial decisions on their own moral and business judgment, without retaliation by the state of Illinois. We do not punish companies for boycotting Canada or France or our own government. The only country in the world singled out for that protection in our pension code is Israel. HB 2723 simply ends the misguided practice of retaliating against peaceful protest. And finally, you will be told that opposition to this law is opposition to the Jewish people. I want to address this directly, because it is the argument many opponents most heavily rely on. You'll hear in a few minutes from two Jewish witnesses who came here today to testify in support of repealing this law. One spent 50 years as a Jewish organizational leader in the state. The other clerked for the president of the Israeli Supreme Court and led J Street Chicago for a decade. The premise that the Jewish community speaks with one voice on this question is not true, and it has never been true. And it is especially not true today when polling shows growing majorities of American Jews opposing shielding Israel from accountability. In recent weeks, 7 of the US Senate's 10 Jewish members voted to block bombs from going to Israel. And just before I entered this hearing, I learned that Evanston Mayor Daniel Biss, soon to be congressman, just wrote a piece endorsing HB 2723. I want to come back briefly to where I started. In the summer of 2023, I visited my childhood home of Turmusaiya with my wife and our 3 young children. It was supposed to be a vacation. Early in the trip, hundreds of armed Israeli settlers invaded our village in broad daylight. They shot 12 people. They killed Umar al-Quttain, who had family in Oak Lawn. The next day, some of the same settlers came back, this time toward our neighborhood. When the shooting started outside our house, my then 7-year-old daughter clung to me and asked me a question. She looked at me terrified and asked me a question that broke my heart. She said, "Dad, what do we do if we get shot?" She's 10 now. She's with us in this room today. She remembers that. The settlers who terrorized our village, who killed Umar, who scarred my daughter, under Illinois law as it stands today, peacefully boycotting them is a punishable act. Companies that decline on moral grounds to do business in their settlements lose access to nearly 900,000 Illinoisans' retirement money. The settlers who killed Khamis Ayyad, a father of 5 from Cicero, under Illinois law as it stands today, are protected from peaceful boycott. This is not theoretical and it's not symbolic. This manifested in real time when Ben & Jerry's decided to boycott those settlers. They made a decision based on their morals to not sell ice cream in illegal Israeli settlements. They were even going to continue to sell the ice cream in Tel Aviv, just not Israeli settlements. And they were punished by the state of Illinois via divestment for taking this basic moral stand. That is what we are discussing today. Not foreign policy in the abstract. Rather, the question of whether the state of Illinois will continue to risk its pension health to shield the settler terrorists who killed Umar al-Quttain and Khamis Ayyad against any company that in the most peaceful way available to it declines to participate in enabling that violence. I told you who Palestinians are. I want to tell you briefly what is happening to us. The schools and universities that mean so much to us are being deliberately erased. Every one of Gaza's 12 universities has been destroyed. Schools sheltering displaced families have been bombed. Community leaders, doctors, journalists, professors are being targeted. Doctors have been lined up and shot. More journalists have been killed in the last 2 years during the genocide in Gaza than in the United States Civil War, both world wars, Korea, Vietnam, and Afghanistan combined. The olive trees I described to you, those are being uprooted in front of farmers who planted them generations ago. The villages I described to you, those are being raided in broad daylight, like mine was, by armed settlers who are protected by the state. Yasmin will speak to what this is doing to ordinary Palestinians. I'm not going to do what she's going to do, but I want you to remember when she speaks that this is what Illinois law currently shields from peaceful protest. So, I am asking you to repeal this law. This law uses the retirement security of teachers, university workers, state employees, and judges to punish peaceful protest. It coerces American companies, including Illinois companies, into changing their lawful behavior to satisfy a foreign government. It declares a single country in the world, alone among all countries, exempt from the most basic forms of nonviolent protest. And it does all of this with no fiduciary duty, no formal appeal, no audit. We can repeal it. We can take Illinois' name off of a project that is one of the tools Israel and its ideologically motivated supporters are using to erase Palestinians. When the transcripts of this hearing are read years from now by our children and grandchildren, when they're read by my daughter Alia, who once asked me what to do if we get shot, what would you like the record to reflect? I'm asking you to advance HB 2723 out of committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Rashid. Before I ask for any questions, could we add Representative Kelly, Ellick, and Olakol to the roll? So does anybody have any questions? What we're going to be doing is, between each set of speakers, we're going to be asking questions. Does anybody have any questions for Representative Rashid? No? I do have one question for Representative Rashid, if it's possible. The bill removes the Israel-related, and I was reading it again last night, but it doesn't remove, there are other countries, Belarus, Russia, Sudan, Iran. It does not remove them from the list. Could you just talk a little bit about that?
Sure, that's a great question. So those are a fundamentally different category in how the underlying law actually treats them. Those countries are required to be boycotted by Illinois law. A company domiciled in Russia or Belarus must be boycotted. Israel is the only country that cannot be boycotted. That is a critical distinction. It's actually the exact inverse. It's the exact inverse. Thank you for that question.
Thank you. Representative Kecker?
Thank you. Thank you, Representative, for presenting this today. Just curious, as I look at the list of witnesses and everybody that's testified here, I think it's a glaring absence that we don't see the Treasurer's office here to give any testimony. Is that an oversight on our part? Was there something up to that point in time to speak to what the state of Illinois has experienced on his end?
So this doesn't directly address the Israel bonds issue that has been the primary purview of his office.
Okay.
This has to do with our pension assets, TRS, SIRS. Yes, it's specifically to the pension code, not Israel bonds.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? No? All right. Thank you, Representative Rashid. Next, we'll call up Ken Kritz from the University of Illinois, Springfield.